Car guys like to argue more than my wife likes to argue, but I do appreciate a good civil discourse, just like the next dino philosopher out there. So let us ponder, if you will, the plight of the rod mod intake manifold versus the OEM LS3 intake manifold. It's no secret, the OEM unit is a master of engineering. The GM engineers did an amazing job. It is tough to beat, and the aftermarket has been trying to beat it for years to no avail. Yeah, there's, the Fast 102, it can produce more horsepower, but it does it by stealing low end power. And I don't think anybody running on the street or daily driver or whatever spirited driving wants that. If you have a dedicated race car and you're living 4 or 5,000 RPMs plus, sure, it's probably no big deal. But I don't think most guys want that. Not only that, but that fast intake manifold is going to set you back, what, a cool grand? And I believe you still need some supporting mods like fuel rails and throttle body, because you're not going to slap your 92 or 90 millimeter throttle body on a 102 intake. So between the intake manifold, fuel rails, and throttle body, what you're looking at 2,000, maybe 2,500 bucks. Maybe you want to save a shekel, buy some cheap fuel rails. Well, the chances of you springing a leak and burning your car down are greatly increased. What if you want to save some pennies on a throttle body? Well, now you're introducing unreliability, and maybe the chance you're going to be walking home or perhaps tuning nightmares so much you pull your hair out and you just go back to the stock one anyway. Well, you don't want to do that. What's the point of choking down your 102 intake or 102 millimeter intake for a 90 or 92 or something like that? So that's where the rod mod comes in, and that's the beauty of this, in my opinion. Because for the money, you supply your own intake manifold, you're in it for $400 parts and labor, plus or minus, just depending on where you go, right? And you don't need new fuel rails. And you don't need a new throttle body. It bolts right in. Everything that you had before is good to go. It's perfect. So the total cost of ownership is reduced, and you don't sacrifice low or mid-range power. In fact, you gain in the low and the mid and the high. Like, it's a win-win situation. How does it do that? Well, for those of you that don't know, we'll just do a quick overview. Here's the stock one. First thing you notice, you have a gigantic PCV return line in the front. There are 3 support towers in the middle there. You can see on the bottom there's some flashing or some molding, some type of casting in there. And then the most egregious of all of these things, you have that sharp transition there on the roof. And as you know, air does not like sharp transitions. Look at a rod mod. We can see the PCV return is gone. The 3 towers are gone. The flashing on the bottom is all smoothed out. And then the star of the show, those radius bars, I think they're 1/2 inch diameter, to smooth out those that sharp edge. The one I have is done by Rick Crawford. I believe he originated this whole concept of the rod mod. If I'm wrong, let me know. I've always operated under the assumption that he created it. Made it famous in the G8 community. Time slips have shown since the G8 came out, rod mod works, period. And then by extension, the Chevy SS guys also adopted it. And again, the time slip showed it. Richard Holdener did a dyno test, and it gained power. GPI, who also sells rod mod intake manifolds, they do their dyno testing, and it shows power. Now, Richard's tests, I don't believe, were very good, and I'm not disparaging Richard at all. I think he does great work. I just think the combination of the engine that he put it on is not really well suited for that, and we'll go into that in a second. Point being, I think rod mod is a great intake manifold for most people. Whether you're stock or cammed, mildly modified, it's going to help. All right, so let's dig into some of the tests that exist out there on the rod mod. I will admit there is not a lot of objective data out there. Historically speaking, it's just been time slips from the G8 guys and the Chevy SS guys and some of the Camaro guys, depending on where you look. They all show gains, right? It exists. It's a real thing. This isn't just a scam to take your money. Most of the videos out there, dyno testing, whatever, is not really objective. They don't show you the initial number or the final number. But I was happy to see Richard Holdner did a recent test. I despise the combination. So we have an LS7, 427 cubic inch short block, topped off with some trick flow heads, 255 cc intake runners, which seem to me small for that combination. So, I had some CNC ported LS3 heads, like factory heads, and I measured the intake runners with my burette. I think they were like between about 225 cc's to 235 cc's, somewhere in that range. And then the Monster 311 heads that I have, the Frankenstein heads, are 273 cc's. And I'm stock cubes. I'm 376. I'm stock bottom end. So for a 255 cc runner to feed a 427, it seems small to me. Now, I'm not a professional engine builder. There may be a reason for that. I don't know. It just doesn't seem right to me. So right away, the combo seems goofy. The cam is pretty big. I don't think anybody that's running, potentially a rod mod intake manifold is going to be running a 247-degree intake duration cam. And already, like if you have a 427 stroker or whatever, LSX, whatever you're running, LS7, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be running a plastic intake manifold. Your budget wise and power expectations are going to put you somewhere else on that spectrum. But regardless, he did show 5 torque increase and 6 horsepower increase from the rod mod. And that's on the stock 90 millimeter throttle body. Now, GPI, they also do their own ported intake manifolds or the rod mod, and they tested them. They did a big shootout. They had all kinds of intake manifolds that they tested. And typical results that you see, a lot of the aftermarket suffered, low and mid only produce high RPM results. But the the rod mod, of course, does unique things in that it picks up everywhere. And so you look at a more tame combination, which you would expect to see most guys running, you have a gain of 11 horsepower and 3 torque. But that is only part of the story, because the next part is they showed the average power between 5 and 7,000 RPM, 12 horsepower gain, and a whopping 38 foot-pounds of torque gain. To me, that sounds suspiciously high, and I'll show you the dyno graphs here in a second. But as you know, average power wins races. Peak power is absolutely meaningless. I don't care what anybody says. Call it power under the curve, whatever. But average power is what wins, period. Now, here's Richard Holdner's test. And the other thing, I love Richard, everything's great, but when he shows his dynos, like we have 3 tests here, they're all the same colors. I have no idea which one is which. So it's frustrating. GPI, they showed their dyno tests. To me, and this may be where that suspiciously high 38 pounds of torque average comes from. This baseline run down here, you can see it tapers off for some reason. I don't know exactly why. I think they said it was a fresh motor, so it could be the rings were still breaking in a little bit. I don't really know, but you can see there's a fairly normal correlation here in this area here, and then it starts to normalize there. So that 38 average may be a little bit suspicious. So moving on a little bit, if we start looking at, well, why does the combination matter? If you look at, in this case, we just have a hose, a 100-foot hose, and then we have how much water can we force through it with a given amount of pressure. This is not a straight line, okay? There is a curve to it. And so this area here where it bends, this is called the knee of the curve. That is where most engineers who are designing stuff are going to target whatever part they're designing for, typically, depending on the application, as that's going to be a balance of all factors, cost, performance, whatever. That's typically what you're looking at. So assume then that the OEM intake manifold is targeted for that knee of the curve. The rod mod then places it a little bit further, right? But this is for a stock cube engine, right? Where you're in that knee of the curve. But all of a sudden you have a 427 with a huge cam and big heads that outflow the factory ones. You're well beyond the knee of the curve. And I copped this blue and this is made up, right? Like this is non-scientific. This is just conceptually speaking to help you understand, where I'm thinking anyway. I copied and pasted these dots, and this is the expected one, right? This follows that trend, but when we put it back on this curve line, you can see that it falls short. And so our actual gains are well below the expected gains. So when we go back to this first test, you have a big car, a big engine. It's overwhelming the intake. And I think in Richard's video, he was talking about, um, we want a big motor to really tax this intake to see if there are any gains. But I really think the combination just wasn't set up. It's overwhelming. It's well beyond the operational range for that intake to show any gains. So I hope you found that useful. Let me know your thoughts. If you have a different experience or any other thing that I'm missing or thinking about. Either way, it's kind of a moot point to me as I'm going to be moving to the Performance Designs intake manifold. But I think I've landed on doing my testing. I want to test the rod mod versus the Performance Designs just because there's a ton of tests already out there with the OEM intake manifold, right? That's what most people are running. Not many people are running the rod mod from my experience. So I think just to put another point of data out there in the cyber world, that's the test I'm going to run. Anyway, hope you got something out of that. See you in the winter circle. All right. I'm glad I waited to post this video. I recorded everything earlier this week and just kind of put off posting it. Super happy I did because Cordes Performance and Racing posted their results. They finally tested an XS manifold, and I'm super happy to see the overall setup is very similar to mine. I have a 233-degree intake cam. This is a 231-degree. I'm going to have ported heads. I have headers. I have upgraded injectors. I have flex fuel. But also, it's a manual with a 390 gear. So that may actually reduce the power because my rear end is a 327. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, they slapped on the XS and they put a 103 intake manifold, which is the same, or I should say throttle body, which is the same I'm doing. Picked up 30 horsepower with no tuning changes. So I don't know if they picked up any more with tuning. And they actually did post the dyno graph. I did kind of put some numbers down here because this screenshot leaves a little bit to be desired. But anyway, you can see, like it looks like it picks up here, right? Even in the low end, it's picking up and then it breaks even. But you can see once you hit 4,000 RPMs, that's where the torque starts picking up and then also the horsepower. So up here, I mean, this is win-win, right? We're not losing anything down low, and you hit 4,000 RPMs, and man, you start hitting your stride. This is great news. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Later.